All right, everybody, welcome. AT Town Hall special event. You know, it's a special event because look at all the boxes on the screen. Call it a special event. People show up. It's awesome. We are doing an AAC Town Hall. And with that said, I have successfully excused myself from the leadership role today. I'm going to turn my mic off. I'm going to let the group run itself and have a conversation. This is not my area to lead the group, so I'm excited to be part of the conversation. I've seated the group so that I knew we would have some conversation. So everybody who has been seated in, thank you. With that said, I'll say, hey, it's Town Hall. What would you like to talk about?
Mike, can I ask a quick question here?
You can.
How did this special event come together? Like, how did the topic of AAC say, hey, we got to have a special event at the town hall talking about AAC? What precipitated it?
I don't even remember. Does anybody remember?
I don't, but it is Better Speech and Hearing Month for ASHA.
Maybe that. I can't imagine that was it.
Put it Speech and Hearing Month, which it really should be. It's not about better. It's just about celebrating.
Yeah, I honestly don't remember. It might have been just in conversation and saying that we hadn't really had a focus of that topic for quite a while and thinking that maybe it was just a question of bringing people together to chat about that. Yeah, I don't remember, but it worked. So why fight it? It worked. It brought people here. Thanks for asking, Chris, and making me think back to the reason, but I don't know. I don't think there was one. I know Mike is here and Mike suggested another topic we're going to do in 2 weeks. That I remember where that came from. We're going to talk about certification and kind of those kind of issues. Mike, hang tight. That's 2 weeks. We'll get to that one. But yeah, I don't remember where this one came from. So
hey, I'd like to get one thing on the agenda, just a few minutes. I'd like to talk about something I and a small team of people are doing DIY that I'd just like to get other people's input on about how it can be used in the early stages of the design here. So if there's a chance to influence how it's used and how it's designed, I'd like to get that feedback now rather than later.
Awesome. Ken, let me check the agenda. Great. Why don't we talk about it right now?
Well, maybe now's a good time to just kind of get an agenda together rather than jump into my.
I'm all for it. Ken, we'll start with you. We'll go from there.
Oh, okay. Okay. Well, so many of you, I'm sure, are not aware, because we're not very good marketers on our side, of a device that we put together in support of our Bliss tactile symbols. And all this work is volunteer work, by the way, which is called a Voice It. It's just a box that speaks text recorded in a file, recorded in a voice file, based on just a word that it reads from an RFID tag. And that RFID tag can be found in a lot of places. Like you can put it in something, you can attach it to something, whatever, but you bring it near the box and it just simply says, oh, I can read what's on that tag, and now I'm going to go play the voice file for that. So after going to CSUN, I saw lots of exhibitors who were leveraging QR codes to say, oh, here's the context for what you're going to see now, and then you did something else, and the device often read something to you, but it set the context with a QR code. And I said, gee, yeah, QR code. There's a lot similar in sense technologically to an RFID tag. It's just visual rather than RF. I said, boy, I wonder if it's possible to add a QR code reader to this box. And turns out you can, because everything's available through Amazon if you want to pay a little money for it. So anyway, we put these two pieces together, and I put a little 5-minute video together just to say, hey, this is what some things are possible, but I'd love to get other people's ideas about what's possible. So this, if you have the tolerance, it would just mean me playing that little video. Is that all right? Okay. Is it possible to share screen, my screen?
Second, everything's possible, Ken. Yes, go ahead.
Okay. So let me just get over here, share it, and then let me get, let me unshare because I forgot about the audio part of sharing. share, but I need to share sound. Okay, let's try this now. I'll bring this over. Run it full screen. I'll redo that. Here we go. So this is the voice that I've got it apart now because the wires for this module run right through the side of it here that all have to be addressed. But this is what it does. Play.
This will be a quick video to show you some of the things that I'm thinking of in association with the Voiceit and a QR code reader. This is a temporary mount for the QR code reader, which just looks like a camera with some lighting around it. It's kind of just a chunky little mount here, and not quite sure what the final mount will look like. But let's get some idea what you can do with this. First of all, the Voiceit will still work, or can still work, as it always did, with an RFID tag.
Different.
You can still change languages.
Español. Diferente. English.
But we can now add support for QR codes. And this is a QR code that you can easily create with an on-site or online capability, like is provided by the QR Code Monkey website. But we have the images for hello and goodbye here, and
Hello. Goodbye.
so it read this QR code here and then play the associated files. I can also create a little out of order here. I can create a book on paper with QR code on each page that plays the sounds for that page.
Good night, moon. The cow jumping over the moon.
Oops, I think I have that page backwards. That should be this page.
In the great green room, there was a telephone and a red balloon and a picture of
A cow jumping over the moon. All right. Can just as easily change language
Español.
and start over.
Buenas noches, Luna. En la gran habitación verde hay un teléfono, un globo rojo y un cuadro de una vaquita que salta sobre la luna.
So all those words were recorded separately in both English and Spanish. And now I want to show you something I learned. I think it's kind of neat. Let me change it back to English so we can follow along.
Español.
Oop, wrong one.
English.
And I can also change the language with a QR code. But let's see what happens when I use a tablet with this.
Good night, moon. In the great green room, there was a telephone and a red balloon and a picture of
This is just a PDF file. Come on.
the cow jumping over the moon. And there were 3 little bears sitting on chairs.
I read it too fast there.
Dos gatitos juguetones.
Oh, that's right.
Dos
And I screwed up the
casitas,
sound files here.
Y una casa de muñecas y un ratón que corretea.
So I have English mixed
And
with
a
Spanish.
comb and a brush and a bowl full of mush.
So that's one page at a time. I also created a sound file here that just strung all the pages together with the traditional ding sound to tell you to change the page. Oops, got to get back out to top level.
English. Good night, moon. green room, there was a telephone and a red balloon and a picture of...
All right, I'm just going to stop there because I just go through the pages a little bit further. But I was inspired to do something book-wise because I was looking at tactile books at the time. So associating a QR code, that's free. Creating a QR code online, you can do that for free, and you can put it on stickers, you could print it directly. And that just is just a different input interface to the voice it. So just curious, let me bring this down, let me stop sharing. And how do I do that? There we go. Back to you guys. Any thoughts on what could be done here?
I mean, I can see lots of application for in different ways, you know, for the setup for, you know, just providing different ways for students to independently, excuse me, to independently listen to a book, or for someone to read a book to a child who didn't have the language, the oral language skills to be able to do it. Can you just remind me, how would the voice have worked if there wasn't a QR code? How would it have spoken?
It wouldn't have spoken unless there was something to trigger it to play a voice file. So we, in the past, have used RFID tags, and this is just a different way for it to trigger a voice file. And the voice file, you record those yourself, except in the case of the core words and all that we've made to support the tactile symbols, those we did already.
So conceivably, could a teacher make a worksheet and talk the worksheet through and have numbers, QR codes by each problem?
Yeah, the only issue there is positioning the QR code, so just that QR code is read rather than a different one. So maybe one per page kind of thing would work best.
And then would they have to have, if they were using, would they have to have everything together, or could they like just record someplace and then add that into the box?
Not quite sure what you mean by record someplace. The recordings go onto a micro SD card that gets plugged in.
So, all right, a lot of teachers work at home and they might not want to take the device back and forth, but they might want to do the recording piece at home.
Yeah, so you could take the SD card with you at home and do the recording there.
I have a question. How would that be preferential to the text-to-speech options that we now have?
It may not be preferable to the text-to-speech, except that text-to-speech normally involves you've already got the text electronically recorded somewhere. So if you've got a physical object, like a book in this case, unless you can do sort of on the fly OCRs, it's reading this image that it's seeing with the camera and then translating it to speech. This is much simpler than that. It doesn't require any additional electronics like a
reading pen?
Well, a reading pen. Could a reading pen do this? Possibly it could. It requires the child or someone have the dexterity to control a reading pen properly. You know, sometimes there is no text to read on the page. And so you would want, it's just the fact that the picture is there. So this doesn't require that there be text on the page, just a QR code.
I run in, if I can,
Based on the setup beforehand, right? Like it's recording. I mean, it's recording whatever you put in. So there's more work on the setup end than perhaps with something that's got text to speech capabilities, but there's less perhaps work on the user end and access to a something that's not digital.
Right, and again, it doesn't require that there be printed text anywhere on the thing that's being read.
Can I sidestep the discussion a little bit? Everybody here, a majority of the people here, you're all advanced in knowledge regarding AAC. And what I'm coming to the conclusion of is there needs to be a lot more AAC information for beginners. And the reason I say that is because I just spoke at the NJISHA conference in New Jersey Speech and Hearing Association. And originally I said, oh, this is like way too simple. It was basic AAC truths and myths. Nobody's going to come to this, but they put it in. We had 150 people who attended, and they were asking the most simple questions. Now, these are SLPs in public schools. Years ago, kids with special needs or complex communication, they went to self-contained special schools. All those kids are coming back into district. And our SLPs are struggling because they now have 2 or 3 of their 50 caseload with AAC, and they're not familiar. The other piece that I'm struggling with is, depending on what town you live in, that's the information that you're getting regarding AAC. Depends on who you know, who you listen to, what was the last webinar, what was, what is the kid using that I need to learn? And nobody is providing. Chris, remember when we did universal truths? There are no universal truths out there for school SLPs. I'm in New Jersey. People are unfamiliar unless you're really into AAC, like the people that care enough to come to this, right? I'm not talking about those people. I'm talking about increased community awareness of AAC. I mean, we still have so many people who think AAC is going to hinder verbal speech development. We know that's not true, but people still think that. There are SLPs who think that, and we struggle against that. And oh, they learned a few words, they don't need it anymore. We know that that's not true. There's research out there. So I guess I'm throwing out there, how do we create some universal training for school SLPs who are now faced with dealing with AAC?
I mean, some of it comes back to requirements in the field and requirements for pre-service, like that is, I mean, there's such a minimal amount of AAC instruction required in graduate school.
Sometimes, many times none, Beth,
Right.
none at all.
And if it is, it's still often an elective class, and it's,
Yep.
it's very, so the requirements, and then there's the push from some folks in the speech and language world. And I realize I am speaking from speech language perspective, and I know we've got teachers on here who have amazing and occupational therapists and other that have amazing AAC skills, but there's still this push, oh, we should have this specialty certification, which is going to further isolate, right? It's going to be, well, no, I'm not a special. We need a specialist. We need an AAC specialist to do it. So it's going to further put that off. So, I mean, I'm agreeing 100. I think it is a real need. I see it in the questions that are asked on like Facebook groups, speech and language Facebook groups and educator Facebook groups. I know Mike has his hand up, so I want
Mike, go ahead.
Well, a true AAC town hall is the only people who use a communication device can speak, but because I think I am the only person who use AAC here and I don't like to talk to myself, I guess everyone can talk. You're welcome. I would like to bring the most important topic up is why am I the only person who use a device here? We need to have more professionals who use AAC.
definitely. Agreed.
Absolutely.
That's the conversation I'm having. So I'm working on creating training for my staff across the board, not just AAC, but across the board with lots of different things, because we are having such high turnover rates. And that's the same conversation I've been having with my teachers. I'm like, you need to be modeling all day long in your classroom. You all have a copy of the communication systems that some of our kids are using, not all. I said, you need to be up there modeling and using it so that they see it, so they don't feel left out. So
When I did the conference at Najisha, and one of the questions was aided language stimulation. And we asked, how many people know what that is? 10 out of the 150. And you would think that everybody in AAC who has an interest in AAC, everybody knows what this is, right? It's not. Modeling is huge, and they didn't know. Blew me away. I was shocked.
Go ahead, Mia, jump in. You were so good at putting your hand up and so bad at turning your mic on. How could you be so good at one thing and so bad at the other?
It's not, I'm sorry. It's my
No.
phone. I have major issues with my phone right now. Sorry. I was just I agree to all of this. We find the same thing in our districts. In fact, we haven't done any higher level over the last 8 years that I have supported the 7 districts in Florida. We have only done introductory. Like literally, we've only done introductory to AAC, and then we go out and coach. And because of the amount of SLPs that we can't keep in the school and the amount of teachers that we can't keep in the school, we are kind of on this, we're stuck here. We're like stuck here in this wheel. But to Mike Hippel's point, what I wanted to say is that I think those of us that are in the schools, and we had an opportunity to do this in Orange County, and I'm thankful to Marcia Sterner and Marcia Persall for this. If you guys know them, they're SLPs in Orange County, but we need to be integrating more AAC users in our professional development, and trying to figure that out. I think that's a huge, because we have a lot of AAC users that are in Gen Ed, and and there is no longer this separate class. I think that is a huge topic, and I love that Communication Matters, it has a speakers bureau, and so that there's those people. But I really actually wonder, like, what are ways that you guys are doing that to integrate that to really talk to parents and staff and all of that stuff.
I know one of the ways that we introduced, it's before I retired a month ago. We have the Gen Ed 5th graders Zoom with an AAC user. In our school, it was with Chris Klein in real time, and he was fabulous. It's kind of laying to rest that don't judge by what you think you see. And that was the key of everything. So that was, and then I used to do whole AAC presentations to the general education 4th and 5th graders with the self-contained kids mingled in, and then they would get to demonstrate their devices and everything else. So I think Zooming and interacting with an AAC user is huge, because then people realize that there's a lot more there than what they think they're looking at. Just
And I think this is just part of, I think it's, we can easily get caught up in our bubbles of getting into the nitty gritty of different robust devices and different language systems and all of that without, but yet we still have speech language pathologists and teachers who use PECs as the overarching term for anything with picture, anybody using anything with picture symbols, right? I mean, like, so there's just like there's some basic things, right? Or like Catherine said, you know, a belief that it's going to stop oral language from developing, or that you have to master a low text or a mid text system before you can be introduced to a high text system. So there definitely is. And then maybe, you know, maybe I think when we go to, it's interesting. I was at the Council for Exceptional Children conference in March, whatever, April or March, whatever it was. And I think that was an area that was like, there was not a lot on AAC at all at the Council for Exceptional Children conference. Like there was a lot of other things, but there was very little on AAC there. I mean, I think kind of getting out to some of these organizations that maybe groups are a part of. I mean, we know ASHA has a strong AAC as far as from a professional organization, and that there's a fair amount of AAC workshops like at things like ASHA, but maybe we need to reach out to ASHA about providing free webinars that are just so there's not a financial barrier. I know that's often a barrier for a lot of people. Like how do we as a group that considers this part of our area of expertise, how do we bring it out to more people?
My staff has it even as scared because every kid is on a different device and has a different core board because it's coming from outside therapy, and that they struggle because they have a hard time modeling all the different devices and keeping them all understanding how to use all the different devices in the classroom and train while they teach.
So I know that's an issue, and I feel like sort of that's one of those like higher level, but I think, I don't know if anybody agrees with me, that lots of different devices in a classroom, whether that's good or bad is besides the point. Lots of different devices in a classroom would be less intimidating if teachers and SLPs had a greater understanding of the basics, and then they could see the similarities rather than focusing on the differences.
I think the classrooms are so difficult right now, especially in the inclusion environment, that as we keep asking teachers to learn and do more, everywhere I turn, teachers are resigning. So I think it's important that we figure out systems that are going to make this accessible on a whole different kind of level, like just embedded in things. We talked about, I think it was last week, the concept of working with curriculum places and looking at how they could embed things about AAC and communication and modeling within the curriculum, taking some of our strategies that we use, such as modeling, and teaching that as an all-together teaching strategy. So it's not like something I do different because my student has AAC. I am modeling what I do in writing. I am modeling what I do, you know, in language, and trying to pull from what already exists in the teaching and best practices world.
Sarah, I see your mic has popped on, so I'm going to ask you, do you want to say anything before I go to Mike?
Go to Mike first and then circle back.
Deal. Mike, you pass it off to Sarah when you're done. Go ahead.
Okay, how many of people know about United States Society of AAC? In. This. Group. In this group, okay, how many of people know about United States Society of AAC?
Mike, I think most of us raised our hand or nodded, at least those of us with cameras on, and then you get little thumbs up too.
Yeah.
But I want you. To guess. How many? M. E. Members. Does. The. S. O. G. C. Society. H. Have. R. Right. Now. But I want you to guess how many members does the society have right now?
No idea.
Yeah, no clue. Tell us.
Kelly's guessing 300.
Two. Three. Zero. 230.
Which is not very many, to be honest.
Is lowest. In.
Mike, heads up, you muted your microphone too. I don't want to miss the end. There you go.
I think.
You might have to say it again, Mike. I think it was your mic was still off. Mike, you're muted again.
No.
Oh, Mike, we keep missing it because your mic gets muted. Sorry.
Does it work now?
Yes.
That is the lowest number in the conference year.
I think part of it might be that it is, again, it's anybody that's a member is probably heavily vested in the field of AAC, as opposed to something like that, a sense of that being relevant for someone who is trying to learn about it. And I think we know that people are struggling, like the cost of all these memberships is part of the issue too. I mean, you've got to belong to ASHA, you've got to belong to, then they're asking you to pay for, to join this, if you want to be in the special interest group for AAC that's a part of ASHA. It's like, it's always like nickel and diming, right? You're paying for college, or you're paying for paying off your student loans. I think those are all part of the issues around it. So again, I wonder if this group, if there's a way to brainstorm some ways that we can, what kind of free resources are high quality resources that are out there for SLPs and teachers, and to learn about, an intro to augmentative communication.
So for me, I think some of it is it's more than just the content of here's what AAC is and this is the group of people, but it's helping people understand why is it important, that it's not just one more thing. And I think that's something I'm seeing everyone throw in the chat, is the importance of hearing from AAC users and from their perspective. And so I think for us, many of us in this group provide professional development probably as a living. And so rethinking, how are we providing this training, one, so that it's not a sit and get where people are coming in and we're imparting everything we know, because we are passionate. I'm an SLP. I got 1 semester on AAC and I was thrown out into the world. And because this is an area that I'm interested in, I went and researched more. But we're finding a lot of people don't know what they don't know. And when I come in wearing my AAC cape and I'm super excited to talk about it and I want to share this wisdom, sometimes I inadvertently turn people off because it's like, whoa, I can't be like that, or I don't know that. So I think it's reimagining and thinking, how are we supporting people? How do we come in a humble way to say, you know what, hey, I used to do some of those things too, and now I know better, so let's do better. And I think that some of that challenge is not how do we blanket PD people. Our boss says constantly, if you're curious, you can find it on the internet. So those people that are curious will go out and they'll research all of the free resources. But it's how do we start this conversation with people? How do we let them know it's okay to be where you're at now, but what's that next step and how can I help you get there? And it's challenging. Some of it is, I think, Beth, you're right, thinking about how do we connect with our universities and help them understand that 1 semester in AAC isn't enough. How do we build networks inside of ISDs or school districts or states to help connect people and resources? But I feel like if we all pooled right now, if we said, let's drop in the chat our favorite resources, this chat would probably be filled with thousands of things very quickly. I don't know. Those are just my thoughts. I think it's open to reimagining how we support people. And especially you guys talked about the Great Resignation, that the more we dump on people, sometimes it turns them off.
And yeah, and I don't think that was my intention, like that we need to go out there. I think it's, again, it's perhaps creating a community for beginners where they can go and find resources and learn about it. I think there are a lot of resources out there, like people were mentioning, like Project Core and the websites from the different vendors. And, there's, if somebody wants to go and do a search, there's a lot out there. Granted, when you do a search, you also find misinformation, right? And so again, I wonder, like, how do we, if this is important to us, how do we make learning about AAC accessible for more people?
If I could bring us back to our other special event, our book study. We had this conversation last time about this idea of the reference in the book. Jim Knight does the idea of the curse of knowledge, which is exactly what Sarah's talking about. That idea of once we know something, it's hard to find. We find it hard to imagine what it's like not to know it. Our knowledge has cursed us, and it becomes difficult for us to share our knowledge with others because we can't readily recreate our listener's state of mind. And that's exactly that thought process. Thanks, Sarah, for making me reach over to my book and search through all my Post-it notes because that resonated. Thank you.
Well, and I think if you're bringing up Jim Knight, I just listened to a podcast that he has, and I'll drop it in the chat. But it's about how there are different types of learners. And so considering that we have some learners who are purpose-driven and they want to know the why behind it. There are some people who just want to know how, like, don't explain everything behind it, just tell me what I need to do. And it's made Carolyn and I rethink how we're designing our professional development to ensure that we're meeting all of those people. Like, I am very much a purpose-driven person. Like, I love the why behind the work, but recognizing that everyone comes with a different learning perspective. And it just helped me rethink even conversations that we're having, that I probably look for something different than other people. So I'll drop that in the chat because, we love Jim.
So
I just, oh, sorry.
No, you go ahead. All right, Mia, I'm going to go. So maybe I'm the forever optimist here, but if I look back 20 years ago, there was like 2 people in my district that had any sort of robust AAC. They were the lucky 2. It cost $5,000 to get a device, and that's just not even counting all the support that was necessary to get it and put it in place. And now, 20 years later, where I'm in conversations, I get emails almost every week about people talking about, I'm thinking of implementing robust AAC as a tier 1 intervention, meaning it's for everybody, all across my school district. What are the pros and cons of a system like that, right? And that's in 20 years. So I think in some respects, yes, we could get really down on ourselves about how not enough people have it fast enough. On the other hand, wow, in 20 years, more people have AAC than ever before. More people know about it than ever before. A lot of that work is done because of parents and AAC users. So a lot of good is really happening, and a lot of change is happening. And I feel like it's just going to keep escalating and get faster. So I might make the claim that there's a lot of evidence to support that whatever we're doing is working.
I would agree, Chris. And the reason why I asked how many of us are non-SLPs in this group is because as a teacher, yes, I knew you were an engineer. I'm just wondering, like, if the non-SLPs here, were you a teacher first? Were, you know, before you became an AT specialist, were you an OT, PT? Because there's so something that I've discussed with Amy and lots of other people, Amy Torado, for those of you who don't know, she's in here too. She's my colleague. She's an SLP. I'm a teacher. I like, you know, it's kind of like a dream team situation, I feel like. And something that I've discussed with her is that there are a lot of SLPs that don't know AAC, and there's a lot of teachers that don't. And I was in the situation when I was in the classroom as a teacher, I was teaching SLPs about AAC, but I was taught by SLPs. So it feels like, and you know, for other professionals, like other therapists, OTs and PTs, it feels like there was someone in their life, whether like someone, and it doesn't necessarily have to be an SLP, doesn't need to be a teacher, might have been an OT, but it just seems like it would be great to have like just a really good sense of this collaboration, because you know, you've and with AAC users, so it's like that, you know, it takes a village type thing. I feel like sometimes, and I don't know if you guys agree with me on this, but sometimes it feels very divided. It feels like, you know, it's just, you know, people are in their silos, and I love the idea of, you know, this collaboration method. And we were talking about, well, how do you bring it to people? I think the only way, and again, it's my own personal opinion, but the only way to do it is to be collaborative, because we've gone into professional developments with SLPs there, and they're asking us, well, how do you make teachers do this? Well, you don't make teachers do it. You bring a teacher that's done it, and that first follower to go to, you know, one of our favorite videos, right? It's same thing. How do you make an OT do it? You don't make an OT do it, right? So that's just a thought. That's why I was kind of asking about that.
It's interesting, Mia. I'll jump in because you made me flash back to my first job in this field, which always was a really powerful foundation for this kind of how I moved forward through not being an SLP, an OT, or a PT, but being an engineer and working in a center for adults with significant disabilities. I was around a lot of AAC users, and that was the education, is the understanding of what that was and how I was going to help them. And the model of our center was a transdisciplinary approach, which meant I was in every meeting with every other service provider. And that's invaluable, because I didn't know any of this. I knew the smallest amount as I started, but just going through, and I would wish that for other people too, that same kind of experience, to get that kind of rich foundation of interacting with all of those different professionals, like we're doing here and having this conversation, and also with users of technology at the same time, to understand the ins and outs And one of my favorite examples is sitting in a meeting with a bunch of SLPs, and one of the adults who was using a new AAC system. And I remember the SLPs talking and talking and talking. No offense to all your SLPs, no, just talking constantly. And they all like scattered at the end. I don't know. They went off to go do something else. And it was me and the guy sitting there, the consumer, the guy. And I looked at him, and he was frantically typing away on his device. And I was like, oh, I'm going to wait. I don't know where else to be. And he looked at me and hit the button. He said, what the hell was that? And I'm like, yeah, I don't know. I don't know what just happened here. And I think that was really interesting, is that, he was there, but I don't know that he was there. Well, he was, but I don't know that anybody else recognized that he was there. And that stuck with me to this day, is that this idea of bringing people in and busting those silos. Mia, I think personally that comes from a spot of not being one of these professionals, but being kind of an outsider brought in and become part of those teams. So I think it's really an interesting observation. Thanks for making me think back to my first job. Fresh, young Mike with his full head of hair and everything else.
I came in as a teacher, so as teacher severe and profound, and I ran into AAC at a conference, and I pushed it, and I've continued to push it in my district, because as a high school teacher, I went, these kids should not come to me without any sort of communication, because they were coming with no AAC, no set of sign language, nothing other than a few gestures. And I'm like, this is not okay. And I have pushed it through my district. And I mean, we do AAC, but I'll be honest, as the teacher who has not an SLP, I do have my assistive technology. I mean, I went through and got my ATP, but on my own, but my SLPs don't have the knowledge, and they are coming to me, who is self-taught and is learning through these groups to get them going, because they just don't have it. And they don't know where to start.
Well, Mia, I think what you and Mike are talking about too is the importance of collaboration, but also of risk-taking and being vulnerable. That if we position SLPs as the experts, and I'm an SLP coming to the table that doesn't have that expertise, we might have already created a barrier where I might be opposed to Rebecca, who comes in and says like, hey, why don't we have a conversation about this student? And I think that is a huge thing that we're trying to work with teams on, is that this isn't an SLP thing. Communication is an everyone thing. And so we all have different expertise, but how can we collectively collaborate together to better support students? And so I think some of that, like when we do training, I'm constantly saying like, oh my gosh, guys, if I could go back to what Mike's holding up the book. If I could show you what I looked like in my first year of being an SLP, and like how many moments now I'm like, oh my gosh. I think it's hard to take that vulnerability, but it's also so important.
I think we also
Can't
need
count
to,
how many teachers and principals walked away from me when I'm talking.
and to piggyback on that, Mike, there's no time in a school system for collaboration. SLPs, OTs, PTs, teachers, they're all overwhelmed with all the paperwork, everything else that needs to be done. So somehow we need to advocate for collaborative time as part of the system.
Sure. And Mike, I agree with what you said 100%. I wouldn't even dare to put that number in the chat of how many people have walked away. That number would be very depressing to me as I move forward. And I think that is part of the deeper conversation that we're talking about here. The things that Sarah's talking about and that Mia brings up. This idea of getting people to a spot of understanding and being truly collaborative. Not to keep pushing the book study, but man, maybe we did pick the right book. I mean, our book is Better Conversations. And I think it's really nice because it kind of fits all of our topics that we talk about. And Mike, I put it in the chat. I don't know if you saw it yet. June 12th is the next one. If you want to jump in. You don't even have to have read the book if you don't want to. Just jump in. Read the book if you want to, because it's fantastic. You don't have to. Guys, there's 2 minutes left. What problems in the world can we solve in 2 minutes? Give it to me. What can we do?
I just wonder if there's a call, if we have a call to action, and if we have like like even just as an individual person, like what might be your next step that you're going to do? Like I'm thinking, I need to make sure that there's more entree into, more ways to entree into beginning information. And how do I make that accessible for more people?
I'll share my Google Classroom when I get it put together.
It's a deal. We'll take it.
I missed the majority of the conversation, but I know I brought this up in past conversations, and Chris did a Talking with Tech podcast on our badges that we have in the state of Wisconsin. But I was just sitting through another meeting last week, and most people are getting the AAC badge in our state. That's the most awarded badge that's out there. And so I think, continuing those avenues where people can do some of that self-study and just, gen ed teachers can take some of those classes and courses too, just because they're through. I know, Mike, you're probably going to say that too. So Mike and I work together a lot. But I think that's an avenue that needs to be explored, and anybody can take those courses. Anyone can get that badge. It's not specific.
I was going to bring it up.
Like you guys are a good partnership there, you and Jennifer, bringing it up, thinking about the same things at the same time. People are asking what those are, Jennifer. Can you put the link in the chat if you have it?
Yeah, and I can, and if you look on the AT or Chris's podcast, it's all on there too. There's an episode.
Chris, can you put the link to your podcast in there too? Oh, I like this. I like this flurry of activity of people dumping things in the chat for the last 2 minutes. There's the chat one. Chris, that's pretty fast. Awesome. Well, you know what? These kinds of things make pretty evident is that maybe we have this topic show up more often. Sorry, Mike, go ahead.
Free. Everything is free.
Well, I like the sounds of that. Now you've said something, Mike. Now you've said something. Who doesn't like free? Jennifer, put the link in the chat.
Not. I mean, there's been continued advocacy at a state level. So the state is footing the bill for the Assistive Technology Forward project. And there is somebody who is monitoring the micro-credentialing program that we have. So it's free to people, but it did take some advocacy at the state level to really bring this awareness to them so that they would fund some of this program. So
thank you. Thank you, everybody. I will make sure I take the chat and I link it into the description of the video when I post the recording, because there's tons of links in there. So I'm writing myself a note so I don't forget. Okay. All right, everybody. I'm now officially 2 minutes late for another meeting. I got to imagine somebody else in the group is too. Final thoughts, anybody? We'll do it again for sure. We'll have the same topic again. Hopefully we'll see it in another town hall. Come on a Monday when I don't call it a special event. Just keep coming. All right, everybody. Have a great rest of the week.